Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a cubic deck profile. So this deck is actually pretty crazy in all the different plays that it can make, and making some insane OTK plays in this deck too, that it can just summon out the all-powerful Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. This card has been insane since it was actually released back when the Dark Side of the Dimensions movie came out, and hopefully, eventually we'll get another Yu-Gi-Oh movie. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon in the description below because we have some awesome rewards, you guys, like getting the description for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this because we have some awesome tech cards in this deck. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. So Crimson Nova is a really awesome boss monster that you reveal 3 other cubic cards in your hand with different names, and then once you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. And it's unaffected by other monster effects with the original attack of 3,000 or less, and when this attacking card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can activate the effect that this card can make a second attack during that same battle phase. So it gets 2 swings, and it's unaffected by everything that's 3,000 or less. And then it also has the ability that during the end phase, each player takes 3,000 life points of damage. That is absolutely crazy for both players to take 3,000 points of damage, because this card can single-handedly deal 6,000 damage on its own, and then an additional 3,000 for it just being like on the field for any reason. But you can only use each effect of Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, once per turn. We then play 3 copies of Duza, the Meteor Cubic Vassal. Duza is a really awesome card that's basically walking Foolish Burial for the deck, that it has the ability that if this card is normal or special summon, you get to send a cubic card from your deck to the graveyard. And then once per turn, during either player's turn, if a monster was sent to the graveyard this turn, while this card's face on the field, you can make this card gain 200 attack for each monster with a different name in your graveyard until the end of the turn, which is pretty good because it's basically the only normal summon in the deck outside of like one other card. We then play 3 copies of Yugioh, the Cubic Seed. Yugioh is really good too because it has the ability that it can't be destroyed by battle, and also when an opponent's monster battles this card, you can place it in the spell and trap card zone as a continuous spell, and if you do, you place a cubic counter on your opponent's monster, and monsters with cubic counters have their effects negated and they can't attack. And if this card is treated as a continuous spell, then during your main phase, you can special summon this card from the spell and trap card zone to get it back on your side of the field to give you an additional monster, which is pretty nice. We then play a single copy of Buster Gunneal, the Cubic Behemoth. Buster Gunneal is probably one of the better OTK pieces in the deck. You have to send 3 cubic monsters you control to the graveyard, and it cannot be special summoned by other ways. And also it can make a second and third attack during each battle phase. And during each battle phase, if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, by battle or by card effect, then you can target up to 3 cubic monsters in your graveyard and special summon them. And then you get to add a cubic card from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good to be able to just immediately add a cubic card from your deck to your hand. And it becomes 3,000 upon summon, which is a really good effect too. It also, we play a single copy of Endora Doom Volt, the Cubic Emperor. Endora Doom is pretty good because this is like a backup play to your copy of Buster Gunneal. This card has the ability that you have to send 3 cubic cards you control, or 3 cubic monsters you control to the graveyard. It comes out at 2,400, and if this card is special summoned to the field, you inflict 800 points of damage to your opponent. And if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect or by battle, then you can target 3 cubic cards in your graveyard and special summon them, and then you can add a cubic card from your graveyard or deck to your hand. We then play a single copy of Blade Garuda. I actually did bump a Blade Garuda back into the deck because it's pretty easy to actually use this card to special summon one of your other cards. Yeah, but it's easy to summon it out because you just have to send 2 cubic monsters you control to the graveyard. And if this card is special summoned this way, this card gains 2,000 attack. It can make up to 2 attacks during each battle phase, and then when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can target a Yugioh in your graveyard, and then you get to send to the graveyard, and if you do, you special summon them, which is pretty cool. You can special summon 3 Yugiohs off this card, which is a really good card because you get to target 3 of those Yugiohs. And then it helps you get your other cards to your side of the field as well because it helps you special summon out Buster Gunneal. We then play a single copy of the Cubic King. This card's really cool because this basically lets you send a cubic card from your side of the field, or cubic monster from your side of the field to the graveyard, and then inflicts 800 points of damage to your opponent, but it's another name, which is the big effect of this card. We then play for the last 3 monsters. We only play 3 copies of Summoner Monk to round out the monsters for this deck. It's a really good card in this deck because it helps you summon out Duza very, very easily. But as you can see, we play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names just in the monsters, and we play a bunch more names in the spells and the traps. So this card's really good too because you just discard any of your spells, which some of your spells give you searches as well. And this card special summons out Duza, which can send something like a Karma from your deck to the graveyard, which then Karma can trigger and be able to use its effect to banish to search Crimson Nova or other cards in the deck that are cubic. So this card's really good in the deck too. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we are going to be playing a single copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, because that's the only thing this deck actually like folds to, is when you're playing against a back row heavy deck. So this card can really help you out with like getting rid of a lot of back row cards to be able to just go through with your Crimson Nova and push for game. One copy of Called by the Grave. Called by the Grave is really good in this deck too, because Called by the Grave lets you just stop hand traps, which is really nice. We played one copy of Reasoning. I really think this card should go to more than one, maybe on the next ban list in March. This card is not bad. I feel like it could go to 2 easily, and it wouldn't really do that much. It would just help out decks like this, and a couple of other decks would be really nice in. But what this card does is you declare a level between 1 and 12. Your opponent declares a level between 1 and 12, and then you start revealing cards off your deck that can be, and then once you hit a monster that can be normal or special summon, you special summon that card if it's not the declared level, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Monster Gate. Monster Gate, you do have to tribute a monster to be able to activate this card, and then you reveal cards off the top of your deck until you can special summon a monster, which is pretty good to be able to just instantly kind of tag out your cards. It's really good too because it helps send stuff like your copies of Cubic Wave, Cubic Karma, the Unification to graveyard, and it helps you get a Duza pretty much out of the deck really quickly, which is what this card is really good at. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Pot of Extravagance being one of the better cards in the entire deck. I love Pot of Extravagance in this deck now because you don't really use the extra deck all that much, so it doesn't super matter what you hit because your big boss monster is the Crimson Nova. Like, Crimson Nova is the big thing that you're going to be using all the time in this deck. So by using the copy of Pot of Extravagance, it's going to let you draw 2 cards by banishing 6 out of your extra deck. So this card comes in pretty handy. It also baits Ash, which is kind of nice too. We then play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods because you need to send the exact spell to the graveyard. Like, this deck functions off of getting Karma to the graveyard because it is basically the searcher of the deck. And basically what this card does is it sends a spell or trap from your deck to the graveyard. We then play 2 copies of Cubic Dorma. Dorma is pretty good in the deck too because I bumped it down to 2 because I put in the Pot of Extravagance, but it makes it so you take no battle damage from attacks involving your cubic monsters. And then it also has the ability that you can use one of the effects per turn during your main phase, that you can send a cubic card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, you draw a card, or you can banish this card from your graveyard and then target a cubic monster in your grave and add it back to your hand. So the draw effect is really nice because it nets you extra cards, but also at the same time, you have Extravagance that says, hey, I can't draw anything else outside of Extravagance. So this card's good, but at the same time, I don't play it at 3 anymore because I play Extravagance. If you don't want to play Extravagance, you can bump this up to 3, but at the moment, I just don't think you need it at 3, which is Extravagance too. We then play 3 copies of Cubic Wave. It basically doubles the attack of an opponent's or doubles the attack of your monster and reduces the attack of an opponent's monster by half, which is pretty cool. It's like Dark Rebellion in a spell form, if you will. And also it has a really neat effect that you can banish it from the graveyard, and then you can also banish this card from the graveyard and any number of cubic monsters in your graveyard, and then you get to target face at monster your opponent controls and put cubic counters on them, which you guys don't know what cubic counters done, which I mentioned earlier. They make monsters that can attack and it negates their effects, which is pretty good. We then play for the last 3 spells 3 copies of Cubic Karma. Cubic Karma is really neat because when it's activated, you can send target a cubic monster on your side of the field, and then you can send up to 3 V-Joms from your deck to the graveyard. And it also has the ability that you can banish it from the graveyard and then add a cubic card from your deck to your hand. And also it has a really neat effect that when you send those V-Joms from your deck to the graveyard, it increases the cubic monster that you targeted by 800 per copy of your V-Jom. So it gives them a boost of about 2400 if you get the maximum boost. And it also has a halving your opponent's life point effect that you can send if a V-Jom is special summoned by this effect of a cubic monster. You can send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, you half your opponent's life points, which is pretty good just to be able to half your opponent's life points. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing just 4 traps in this deck, and that is a single copy of Cubic Ascension and 3 copies of Cubic Unification. So Unification is the fusion trap of the deck that you will sometimes, and when I mean sometimes, I mean very rarely, never, summon out your copy of Crimson Nova, the Trinity of the Dark Cubic Lord. You're very rarely going to summon that card, but it's there just in case. But what this card does is kind of neat, that Unification lets you banish it from the graveyard when a cubic monster on your side of the field is destroy by battle or leaves the field, you can just banish this. And then special summon a level 4 cubic monster from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects this turn. And then Cubic Ascension is kind of helpful as a one-of that when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can special summon a V-Jump from your deck, and if you do, change the attack target to it, and then perform damage calculation. If your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 or higher than yours, you can banish this card from your graveyard, and then if you do, you can special summon a V-Jump monster or from your graveyard, and then you can special summon a V-Jump seed from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then, if your opponent controls a monster while this card effect was activated, you can special summon up to 2 V-Joms on your side of the field as well. So this card can get you up to 3 V-Joms, which is pretty cool, which is why I like playing this card as a one-of. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. I did play Cubic Cataclysm, but I dropped it out for the copies of Extravagance just to dig deeper in the deck. It was a good card, but I just feel like it was a little bit slow being a trap, so I dropped it out because it does help get the copies of the it does help getting out your copies of the cubic counters onto other monsters, but at the same time, I just didn't feel like I quite needed it with all the copies of the Extravagance that I'm just digging into the deck. So for the extra deck, since we're playing Extravagance, you're playing a lot of like 2-ofs and 3-ofs, but these are all suggestion cards. You can play anything you want in the extra deck because you don't really touch it all that much. So we're going to play a single copy of Crimson Nova. Crimson Nova is pretty good because you can sometimes summon it. It's very, very rare, but it does take 3 Crimson Novas to summon this card. But when you do, you win. Essentially, this card might as well just say when this card is summoned, you win the duel, because it has the ability that it must be special summoned by the above fusion materials and cannot be special summoned by other ways. It cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And when this card declares an attack, you can make your opponent's life points, you can half your opponent's life points, just whenever it attacks, which is a ridiculously good effect. It also has the ability that when this card destroys the opponent's monster by battle, you can activate the effect that this card can make a second attack during each battle phase, and hit this card, if you take any effect damage from the opponent, then your opponent takes the equal amount of damage that you took. So this card is ridiculously good. It can't be targeted either by opponent's card effects. It's a 4,500 beat stick that's essentially like matches a Blue Eyes Ultimate. Like, this card is ridiculous. We then play a single copy of Access Code because it gives us additional pops. If you don't want to play Access Code, you don't have to in this deck at all. You can drop it out, play Boral Sword, Borreload. It doesn't matter in this deck. I mean, it helps because you get multiple pops out of it, but at the same time, it could be Appaloosa, it could be Borreload, Boral Sword. It doesn't super matter. I play Avermax as well. Avermax is another like boss monster in the deck that sometimes comes up, but it's very rare. Unicorn, I highly recommend playing double Unicorn in the extra deck because you do want to spin stuff with it. Double Phoenix. Phoenix is really helpful too because sometimes you want to pop spells and traps. Double IP Masquerena. IP Masquerena helps you go into your copy of the Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax really easily, which is why I play the double IP Masquerena. Masquerena is just an overall really good card in this deck and is why I play it as a 2-of. We play a single copy of Link Rebo because you can sneak it in with a V-Jom. 2 copies of Alamirage because Alamirage is really good when you normal summon out a copy of, say, for example, sometimes you summon out a copy of V-Jom and you want to go into an Alamirage just to get your V-Joms in the graveyard. Then we play 2 copies of Secure Gardna. Secure Gardna helps out a lot too because you can use Secure Gardna with the copy of the Salamangreat Alamirage to get you an additional monster on your side of the field. And then we play a single copy of Baguska. Baguska comes in handy too because you can use the Baguska to be able to put in defense position with your copies of what's it called? The Summoner Monk and Duza. Use those 2 monsters to overlay to summon out your copy of 41 Baguska to be able to kind of lock your opponent down until you can finally summon out your copy of Crimson Nova, and then you just go ham with the copy of Crimson Nova into your opponent. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really crazy, relatively budget deck. I know I say that as you have access to Code Talker on screen, but it is budget, I will say, because the extra deck doesn't matter. You can play anything you want. A lot of these are suggestion cards. This is how I built the extra deck, but I will say, again, you can drop these. If you don't want to play the Link 4s, you don't have to play the Link 4s. You can play any Link 4, Appaloosa. You can play anything that you want that'll just fit in the deck. And Extravagance is like $20 a piece right now, which is a little expensive, but you can get away with the deck very easily for less than $100. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below, because it is absolutely an insane deck that gets you this crazy big boss monster on your side of the field that is like one of the most powerful boss monsters in the entire game. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.